They stole from their own daughter, not knowing she would rise from the ashes to destroy them all. Claire stood at the back of the courtroom, her hands trembling as she listened to the man in a sharp suit say loudly, "The sale is final. Nothing can undo it now." The words hit her like a slap. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. That land was hers. It was the only thing her grandfather had left her before he died. It wasn't just land. It was his promise, his memory, and her future. Just a week ago, Claire had been at work when her phone rang. A man's voice she didn't recognize said, "You don't know me, but I thought you should know. Your family sold that property. I saw your name on the original documents. But I also saw the forged." Claire had thought it was a joke. But now, here she was, in a courtroom where her own parents had stolen from her, lied in legal papers, and taken away something that was never theirs. She drove straight to their house. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She pushed open the door without knocking. "Is it true?" she asked, staring at her mother, Evelyn, who sat calmly at the dining table. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about? You sold Grandpa's land, the one he gave me. You forged my signature." James, her father, stood by the window, silent. Evelyn scoffed. "We did what we had to do. We were drowning in debt. You were never going to use that land anyway." Claire felt her legs go weak. "So you just took it? Lied? Sold it like it was yours?" Evelyn stood now, her voice sharp. "Yes, we did it to survive. If you think that makes us monsters, fine. But don't act like you understand what it's like to be desperate." Claire's hands clenched into fists. Her eyes burned, not with tears, but with fury. "You could have asked. You could have told me the truth." James finally spoke. "We knew you'd say no." Claire took a step back, heartbroken. "You didn't just take land. You broke me." She turned toward the door, then paused. Her voice was low but deadly. "You think this is over? You don't know me at all. I swear, you will pay for this." Claire was her grandfather's favorite. Everyone in the family knew it. While her parents were often cold and distracted, Grandpa Raymond had always made time for her. When she was just a child, he would sit with her on the wooden bench under the mango tree in their old village home. He told her stories about hard choices, about standing for what is right, and about protecting what matters, especially family. "You don't need to be loud to be strong," he once told her. "Strength is doing what's right, even when it hurts." Claire carried those words with her into adulthood. They helped shape her into the woman she became, a sharp, determined corporate lawyer. In Lagos, she built a life from scratch. No one helped her, not her parents, not her relatives, just her own grit and late nights. She handled contracts for big companies, made good money, and walked with quiet confidence. But she never forgot her grandfather. Before he passed, he called her aside one evening. "That land behind the river," he said softly, "it's yours. I've written it in my will. Don't let anyone touch it. That place has roots." Claire had nodded, not knowing those roots would one day be torn out by the people she trusted most. Back at home, Evelyn and James were living a life that looked calm on the outside, but was crumbling inside. Evelyn, proud and bitter, hated asking for help. James had lost his job 2 years ago and slowly drowned in shame. He started gambling to try to win back money fast, and when that failed, he borrowed from people he should have avoided. One of them was Mr. Nwosu, a ruthless loan shark known for making his debtors vanish. He gave James money with interest that tripled in 3 months. When they couldn't pay, Nwosu's boys came knocking, first with threats, then with violence. Evelyn panicked. She couldn't bear the thought of the neighbours finding out they were broke. She pressured James. They had to fix it, and fast. That's when the idea of the land came in. The papers were in the house. Claire's signature could be copied. No one would know. It was the only way out. But they didn't expect the land to mean so much to her. They thought she was too busy, too far away, too detached. They didn't understand that it was never just about property. It was about Grandpa, about memory, about respect. Claire tried to keep working after the discovery, but her heart wasn't in it. Her hands trembled at her desk. Her mind raced through every moment her parents had lied to her face. Her best friend Maya came to her apartment and listened as Claire told her everything. "You need to fight," Maya said firmly. "Don't let them walk over you. They stole from you, Claire." David, a colleague and quiet admirer, offered to help with the legal side. "You're not alone in this," he told her gently. But Claire felt alone, torn between pain and rage. Part of her wanted to understand why her parents did it, but a bigger part couldn't forgive them, not just for the crime, but for the silence, for the way they looked her in the eye and pretended everything was normal. They hadn't just sold land, they had sold their daughter's trust, and that trust was not coming back. Claire knew now, this wasn't just a family issue, this was war. Claire sat in her small apartment, her laptop open, the documents spread across her dining table. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes stayed focused. Line by line, she compared the signature on the land sale papers with her real signature from an old ID copy. It was fake, sloppy even. Someone had tried to mimic her handwriting, but they hadn't gotten it quite right. She had no doubt now. Her parents had forged her name. Claire printed out the documents and placed them carefully into a folder. Her jaw clenched. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore. It was physical, right there in her hands. She didn't call. She didn't send a message. She drove straight to the house she grew up in, parked outside, and walked in without knocking. Evelyn was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, acting like it was just another quiet evening. Claire slammed the folder onto the table. Evelyn jumped, turning around slowly. "What's this?" Claire didn't answer. She just opened the folder and pulled out the forged document. "Recognize this." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were on fire. Evelyn's eyes scanned the page. "Claire, you signed my name," Claire cut in. "You forged my signature and sold my land." Evelyn looked down at the floor. Her hands trembled now. She didn't deny it. She didn't try to lie. After a long pause, she whispered, "We didn't have a choice." Claire laughed bitterly. "There's always a choice. You just made the wrong one." Evelyn's voice cracked. "James owed money. We were getting threats. They came to the house, Claire. They said they'd kill us if we didn't pay up. Mr. Nwosu doesn't joke." Claire stepped back, stunned. "You still should have told me. You were busy. You were far. We thought maybe we could fix it before you ever found out." Claire shook her head slowly, tears burning in her eyes. "You thought you could steal from me and I'd be too distracted to notice." Evelyn stepped closer. "We did it to protect the family, to survive." Claire's voice turned cold. You did it to save yourself, and you didn't care what it cost me." Just then, James walked in, holding his car key, stopping when he saw the tension in the room. He looked at the document in Claire's hand and sighed. "She knows," Evelyn said softly. James sat down heavily. "Claire, it wasn't supposed to go like this." Claire glared at both of them. "Who did you sell it to?" Evelyn hesitated. "A company. They didn't give their full name. Some development group. But we found out later they're linked to Nwosu. It's all one dirty circle." Claire's heart dropped. She wasn't just robbed. She was robbed by people who lived outside the law, who hurt people, who could ruin lives. Her land, her inheritance, was now in the hands of criminals, and it was her own parents who handed it over. She turned to leave. "Where are you going?" Evelyn asked, her voice shaky. Claire didn't answer. She walked out the door without looking back. That night, Claire sat alone in her living room, the folder on the table beside her. She lit a candle, then pulled out a dusty old photo album. She turned to a photo of herself, age 7, sitting between Evelyn and James. They were smiling. She was holding a ribbon from a school competition. She stared at the picture for a long time. Then, without blinking, she tore it from the page. She walked to the candle, held the photo above the flame, and watched it curl, blacken, and disappear into ash. From that moment, something inside her hardened. This wasn't just about land anymore. It wasn't even about money. This was war, and she wasn't going to fight fair. Over the next few days, Claire began building her case. Quietly, carefully, she reached out to a private investigator to look into the sale, the shell company, and Mr. Nwosu's link to the buyers. She used her connections in law to pull property records and found more than one transaction tied to the same shady development. She spoke to a retired judge she trusted, who hinted that if she could prove coercion and forgery, she might have a chance to reverse the deal. But Claire wasn't only thinking of court. She wanted her land back, but more than that, she wanted her parents to feel what they did to her. She wanted them to see everything fall apart and know it was her hand that pulled the string. She hadn't planned for revenge. She hadn't grown up that way. But betrayal changes people, and Claire was no longer the quiet daughter who forgave easily. She was the woman who had nothing left to lose, and that made her dangerous. Claire's investigation led her down a quiet road in the village where her grandfather once lived. She found herself standing in front of a dusty iron-gated building, the office of his old lawyer, Mr. Adebayo. The man was now retired, nearly blind, and living in the back of the house. But when Claire introduced herself, he smiled sadly and invited her in. She showed him the forged documents. He shook his head slowly. Raymond would have never allowed this. Then he said something that made Claire's heart stop. Your grandfather knew this family had cracks. He once told me, if something happens to me and the wrong hands reach for the land, Claire will know what to do. She just has to find the key. Claire blinked. What key? Mr. Adebayo struggled to recall. He placed the land in a trust, hidden, protected. The papers are real, but they won't mean anything unless you find the access key. He gave it to someone close. Claire drove home in silence, her mind racing. Her grandfather knew. Somehow, he knew, and he had tried to protect her. The only problem was, Evelyn had the key. She just didn't know it yet. That night, Evelyn and James sat in their living room, whispering anxiously. Claire's visits to old lawyers, her sudden interest in property records, it all pointed to one thing. She was coming for them. Evelyn, sharp as ever, decided to act first. She called Maya under the guise of concern. Claire isn't well, she said, her voice low and full of fake sadness. She's seeing things that aren't there. She's angry. I'm afraid she'll hurt herself or worse, burn everything around her. Maya, confused but worried, confronted Claire the next day. What's going on? Your mum called me. She said you're spiraling. Claire's eyes narrowed. She's trying to isolate me. You know that, right? Maya hesitated. Claire, this revenge path, it's changing you. Claire turned away. Maybe I need to change. And she did. Even David, who had been quietly by her side since the beginning, noticed the shift. Claire stopped answering his calls. She worked late into the night, face buried in files. When he came to check on her, she barely looked up. I'm fine, she said flatly. You're not, David replied. You're obsessed. I have to be. Their friendship, once tender and filled with unspoken feelings, started to fade into cold distance. Meanwhile, the developers had begun their next move. Large trucks rolled into the land. Surveyors marked it. Bulldozers idled nearby, ready to tear down what little remained of the house Claire once played in. And just like that, the land her grandfather once protected felt closer to death. One evening, Claire walked through the old house on the land, ignoring the private property signs. She sat on the porch steps and remembered how her grandfather used to hum while peeling oranges. She could almost hear him. Her chest tightened. Flashbacks played in her mind. Her younger self, 9 years old, running barefoot on the soft earth, calling to Evelyn to watch her do cartwheels. Evelyn barely looked up from her mirror, adjusting her jewelry. You'll get dirty, she had said, frowning. Even then, Evelyn was concerned with appearances. Even then, Claire had been alone. That night, Claire hired a new lawyer, Miss Diane Green, older, smart, and with a spine of steel. Diane read through the mess of Claire's case and looked her in the eye. This will cost you everything. Your job, your peace, your family. Are you ready for that? Claire answered without hesitation. They already took everything. Diane nodded slowly. Then we fight. But it wasn't enough for Claire to win in court. She needed her parents to feel what she felt. She needed closure. So she planned a secret confrontation. She waited until both Evelyn and James were home, then knocked. When they opened the door, they saw the fire in her eyes. I know about the trust, she said coldly. Grandpa protected the land, and I know you have the key. Evelyn paled. What key? Claire stepped inside. You know exactly what I'm talking about. He gave it to someone he trusted. You always kept that locked box in your drawer. What's inside? James looked away. Claire turned to him. You knew all along, didn't you? That it wasn't yours to sell. That you were gambling away something sacred. James's voice broke. I didn't want to. I swear Then why didn't you stop her? Claire snapped. Why did you let her steal from me and lie like it meant nothing? Evelyn's face hardened. I did what I had to do to keep this family alive. Claire's voice trembled with fury. You killed it. You killed whatever love was left. Silence filled the room. Then Claire reached into her pocket and placed an old family photo on the table, one she hadn't burned yet. She tore it in half in front of them. You'll regret the day you betrayed me, she said softly, because I'm not your daughter anymore. I'm your reckoning. And she walked out, leaving behind silence, broken hearts, and two people who finally understood the storm they had unleashed. Claire stormed into her mother's bedroom, her breath tight with fury, eyes locked on the old carved jewelry box sitting on the dresser, the same box Evelyn had refused to open all these years. Open it, Claire said, her voice low, threatening. Evelyn froze. What? I know the key is in there. The one Grandpa left. Evelyn hesitated, then reached for the box. With trembling hands, she pulled it open and removed a tiny gold key wrapped in faded cloth. Claire's hands clenched. So you did have it. Tears formed in Evelyn's eyes. I didn't know what it was for. I swear. But Claire's face twisted in disbelief. You knew. You just didn't want to believe he trusted me more than you. James stepped in, confused. What's going on? Claire turned to him like a storm. Did you know this key existed? James paused, then lowered his eyes. I found it in her drawer. I used it. I gave the documents to the buyer before the trust could be activated. Evelyn gasped. You did what? James looked up, guilt soaking his face. I was trying to pay them off quickly. The threats, they weren't going away. I didn't tell you because I thought the sooner we sold it, the safer we'd be. Claire laughed bitterly. So you stole from me, lied to her, and handed over our legacy to criminals just to cover your gambling debt without waiting for more excuses. Claire took the key and stormed out. She rushed to Ms. Green's office. The trust papers were hidden in a locked safety deposit box, only accessible by the key. Inside, they found it, a notarized clause signed by her grandfather, granting exclusive ownership and financial control to Claire. The trust stated clearly, no sale could be valid without her personal consent. Any deal made without it was void. Claire now had the legal power to take everything back. In the courtroom, it all came crashing down. The judge listened carefully as Claire presented the trust. Ms. Green laid out the forgery with expert precision. Then came the final blow. Audio recordings from Claire's investigator, catching Mr. Nwosu's threats on tape. The developer's lawyers grew pale. Evelyn and James sat frozen as the judge declared the land sale illegally executed and nullified. But then, just as Claire thought the worst was over, another document surfaced. An anonymous bank transfer had helped fund Mr. Nwosu's land grab. The account name was fake, but the trail led back to someone familiar. James. Claire's heart cracked. You funded him? She whispered in court, unable to believe it. James stood, defeated. I didn't know it would go this far. I was desperate. The courtroom went quiet. Even Evelyn couldn't defend him now. The judge ordered the land returned to Claire, the developers fined, and criminal proceedings opened against Mr. Nwosu, and possibly James and Evelyn. After the verdict, Claire didn't leave. She waited. Outside the courthouse, her parents walked out into a crowd of reporters. The same people they used to impress now shoved microphones in their faces. Claire stepped forward. I need to speak with them, she said, and the reporters gave space. Evelyn and James stopped. Claire looked them both in the eye. You didn't just steal land, she began, her voice trembling with strength. You stole trust. You stole love. You turned me into someone I barely recognized. James opened his mouth, but she raised a hand. No more lies. You made your choices. You chose survival over truth, greed over family. You thought I'd be too loyal to fight back. Tears rolled down Evelyn's face. I was loyal, Claire said, but I'm also my grandfather's granddaughter. He taught me to stand for what's right, even if it means standing alone. She stepped closer. I didn't win because I'm smarter. I won because I refused to let your betrayal define me. James looked broken. Evelyn couldn't meet her eyes. I'm not doing this for revenge anymore, Claire whispered. I'm doing it so I can finally move on. She turned and walked away, the weight finally lifting off her shoulders. Mr. Nwosu and the developers backed off once the ruling was final. No one wanted more heat from the courts or the media. Claire reclaimed her land, but it didn't feel like a victory parade. It felt like standing on ashes. Everything burned, but clean. Justice was hers, but peace. That would take time. Claire took full control of the land and the trust. The documents were now legally hers, and every crooked deal that had happened behind her back was undone. For the first time since her grandfather's death, she stood on that piece of earth, not as a betrayed daughter, but as the rightful owner. Her hands touched the soil like it was sacred. It was. It held her pain, her past, and now her future. She didn't speak to Evelyn and James after the verdict. She blocked their numbers, ignored their messages. But deep inside, she wasn't completely at peace. There were moments, quiet ones, where grief crept in, not for the land, not for the money, but for the parents she thought she had, the ones who were supposed to protect her. She stared at an old family photo one night, the only one she hadn't destroyed. She didn't cry. She just sighed. "I don't hate you," she whispered, "but I'll never trust you again." She visited her grandfather's grave the next morning. The breeze was gentle, as if it had waited for her. "They tried to bury me, Grandpa," she said softly, "but they didn't know you planted me." And from that place of pain, Claire made a decision that surprised even herself. She met with architects and local leaders. She spoke to youth in the community and listened to their dreams. Then, she made her announcement. Claire would build a community centre on the land, a place for learning, mentorship, safety, and growth. It would be named after her grandfather, the Raymond Justice Centre. When the news hit the local press, people cheered. Many remembered Raymond as a kind man who used to hand out food during Christmas. The project became a symbol of something bigger, a place built from betrayal but rooted in healing. Evelyn and James were left to face the law. Fraud, forgery, and obstruction charges moved forward. But Claire didn't show up to the hearings. She didn't need to see them fall. Life was already giving them consequences. Evelyn was no longer respected in the church or society circles she once clung to. James was alone, jobless, and quiet. There were whispers that he'd started going to therapy, that Evelyn now volunteered at a shelter once a week. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was regret. Claire didn't know. She didn't care to find out. Not yet. David showed up one evening at the construction site. "I heard about what you're building," he said with a small smile. Claire nodded. It's what he would have wanted. David stepped closer. "You look different, stronger." "I feel different," she said. "For the first time, I'm not angry. I'm just ready to live." She looked at him. "I'm sorry I pushed you away." He smiled softly. "I'm still here." They didn't rush into anything, but they sat together in silence, watching the workers lay the foundation. A few days later, Maya came by with a donation check and a tight hug. "I knew you'd rise," she whispered, and Claire did. She walked with purpose, spoke with power, smiled more often. She was no longer the daughter begging for love or the woman burning for revenge. She was Clare Raymond, the heir, the survivor, the avenger, a woman who turned pain into power and betrayal into legacy. As the first bricks of the community centre were laid, Claire stood barefoot on the land, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply. This was her story now, and it was just beginning. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting golden light across the quiet land. The morning breeze carried the scent of fresh earth and wild grass. Claire stood still, her arms folded gently, her feet planted firmly in the soil her grandfather once walked. The construction had paused for the day. No workers, no noise, just silence and peace. In her hand, she held a letter. The edges were worn, the handwriting faded, but still strong. She had found it tucked between the pages of an old journal in the safety deposit box. It was from him, her grandfather. "My dearest Claire," it read, "if you're reading this, it means the storm has come. I pray you met it with the fire I saw in your eyes since you were a child. Remember, our strength is not in how hard we fight, but in how true we remain to who we are. Let truth be your weapon. Let courage be your compass. And when the smoke clears, don't stay in the ruins. Build again. You are not what they did to you. You are what you rise to become." Claire pressed the letter to her chest, eyes full, but tears held back. She turned her gaze across the land that nearly broke her, the land she now owned not just in title, but in soul. A quiet smile formed on her face, sad but sure, worn but undefeated. She whispered to the wind, "This is just the beginning." As the light bathed her face, and the foundation stones of the new centre caught the sun's glow, the camera slowly pulled back. The land, once stolen, once fought over, now stood as a symbol of justice reclaimed, and a legacy no longer lost but reborn. Hey besties, you really stayed till the end? You're the absolute best. This one was a wild ride. Betrayal, secrets, and a comeback we'll never forget. If it hit you in the heart like it did us, don't forget to like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and smash that subscribe button for more stories that bring all the feels. Love you loads. See you in the next one. Bye.